China
If you love
deserves-
China so much, why don't you marry it?
Once again, I don't live there. I choose to live here.
Like, what? I have seen Hasan talk about issues off the cuff. Why is Hasan speaking as though, like, Xi Jinping is personally behind him with a gun to his head? Like, what is this? Like, I'm genuinely asking why. I've seen Hasan talk more off the cuff about a bunch of issues. Like, why is he so careful? Is he being like paid or something? Does he think that he's going to break into like the Chinese market at some point? Well, I don't understand.
Like America, where every person in Taiwan has a weapon.
How do we feel about Taiwan, Hasan? China or not
Taiwan?
China? Or is it China or not China?
That's the American policy. Whatever the American policy is, whatever the American perspective
What's your
is.
opinion? You really won't say?
No, I'm saying it's like one country, two systems. You know?
No, it's not.
That's not the American perspective. The American perspective is that it's two countries, two systems.
Two different countries.
Really?
Taiwan and China.
Is that according to American foreign policy?
No, wait, dude. Does he actually seriously believe that there's an ongoing civil war between the two countries that haven't fought for 70 years and have completely different systems with completely different elected? Are we actually doing this? Seriously? I think he's mixing up Taiwan and Hong Kong. Oh, is he thinking Hong Kong right now? Because that actually is one. Oh.
What's your opinion? What's your opinion? Taiwan independent?
My opinion on Taiwan
no,
is...
he's saying Taiwan. If he's mixing that up with Hong Kong, then like he's...
That Taiwan is the Chinese concept of Taiwan should...
Are we being serious? Is he like... Is he like actually getting paid off or something? What's happening here? What is this? Hello?
Remain in the hands of the people in Taiwan who
therefore it's independent.
Who, for the record, for the most part, just believe to not disrupt the ongoing relations with.
Why are you being
China.
so carefully footed around
Because
this?
I know that there's going to be a subreddit.
Issue.
There's going to be a subreddit post with like 1 million comments being like, Hasan wants everyone in Taiwan to be killed because he loves China. He's a Xi Jinping.
That's the correct position is that they're two separate countries, and if people disagree with you on that, they're wrong. This is why I say that like Hasan's leftist advocacy is undercut significantly by the fact that he wants to be like a broadly loved like celebrity. You know what I mean? Like he's so desperate to tiptoe around anything that could be controversial to like the tanky space. But here's the thing, man, okay? You're making that space worse. Like you used to complain loudly about the crazy tankies or whatever, but like they're getting worse because there are so many lefties who think that it's a cringe and liberal to say obviously true things because it's not towing the party line on that issue, you know?
What I heard.
That's what I just, it's already over. You asked me that question, like in jest, and it's gonna already
No,
go
I was
there.
genuinely curious what you think about it.
I think that
Hasan Piker am using a gun.
I think that overall it's contemporary history is complex. At the end of the day, if the Taiwanese citizens would ever put this up for a vote and we're like, we want to fucking be an independent nation, it's up.
They are an independent nation. They are.
Up to them. You know what I mean?
They
You
already
can't.
done that?
No. There is no.
No, what Hasan said is true from everything I've read. The most people in Taiwan nowadays support just keeping the status quo. Like
But the status quo is that they're an independent nation. Okay, so the complexity here, or like, Taiwan is de facto an independent nation in every like material sense. Taiwan operates as an independent nation. However, according to like a piece of paper, literally according to like the most thin of legal veneers, Taiwan is like technically a separate province, and the Taiwanese people have voted to keep things the same outside of Chinese control. Like they don't want to be controlled by Taiwan or by China because they don't want to rock the boat basically. But like that to say that Taiwan is not an independent country because of some incredibly thin legal veneer when every single material fact about Taiwan makes it an independent country is ridiculous. Like It would be like arguing that like South Korea is at active war right now because they never officially signed like a cessation of conflicts with North Korea or whatever, or likewise with Taiwan. It's the material reality contradicts what's written on paper.
Kind of
But they're
strategic
they're-
ambiguity of what's going on there.
The overwhelming majority's consensus opinion is that they don't want to disrupt relations with China, and they also, like, obviously if it was a situation between like full-blown independence versus like becoming a Chinese state, like becoming a part of the Chinese
well,
state.
do the people of Taiwan like pay taxes in China? Like, do they vote? And
I don't know.
well,
I don't know.
So Ethan is correctly pointing out that like we should be focused on what the material reality is. So this is polling in Taiwan that is done over time, where we see like how people are shifting on the issue, right? So deep red is independence as soon as possible. Light red is maintain status quo, move towards independence. Light blue is move towards unification, and dark blue is unify as soon as possible. So there does seem to be a decreasing number of people who want unification, which that would be China taking over Taiwan, and an increasing number of people who want to move towards independence. But we have to understand that the independence here that is being referred to is a legal framework. In reality, what the status quo is independence. So I think it would be easier to say the two blue colors up here are people who want China to take over Taiwan. And everything but the blue is people who want to be free of China. Whereas the red and light red are people who want to solidify that independence in a legal sense. Whereas, again, the white refers to like de facto independence. Does that make any sense? Okay. Personally, I think it's very silly to pretend that Taiwan is not independent because of some like legal technicality when in every procedural sense it operates as an independent country. You know, like the equivalent of this would be, imagine if like the UK never formally gave up the United States and treated us as colonies that were still in rebellion. But we've also been trading with the UK for centuries, and we have like everything separate, and everything is the way it is right now. But the UK is like, oh well, you know, that province over there, and the, you know, yeah, we're still an empire. That province will pay their dues to us one day. We're just resolving a temporary dispute, like crap like that, you know.
I don't know
They
the
even have
exact
elections.
details of that.
Do they have like travel status in China?
But the thing is, like, as far as Chinese Taiwanese relations goes, like the original inception of the country is
Taiwan
a fascist dictatorship that America recognized as the real China until Richard Nixon.
This has nothing to do with their de facto independence. This is just like, let me just inject my lefty creds here. Yeah, there are lots of countries that are fascist dictatorships that America did bad things. What does that have to do with the issue?
Normalized relations with China, and that's where they implemented the they call it strategic ambiguity, which I call lying.
Taiwan maintains that Taiwan is already an independent country.
Yes.
This does not have to push for any sort of formal independence.
Oh yeah, also he's misrepresenting the policy of strategic ambiguity. The policy of strategic ambiguity is whether or not the United States would use its military to defend Taiwan if it was invaded by China. The U.S. unambiguously recognizes Taiwan as a separate country.
There are, well, that's because they don't want to do like a full-blown.
Exactly.
They don't want to disrupt the status quo. That's why they're saying that.
Well, sure, they don't want to be invaded by China.
They want autonomy while simultaneously being under the Chinese banner, according to international.
No, they're not. The Taiwanese people do not. They are not under the Chinese banner. The majority of people want the status quo, leaning towards independence, and the status quo is not them being under the Chinese banner.
They don't want to be invaded by China.
They want autonomy while simultaneously being under the Chinese banner, according to
they want independence, but they just don't want to be like attacked by China militarily.
Well, that's part of it for sure. So you understand how Taiwan was developed as a nation state, right? Like, so Mao purged and defeated the counter-revolutionary forces. They like
that technical note. They weren't the counter-revolutionary forces. They were just the current government of My understanding is that when you talk about counter-revolutionary forces, you're usually talking about forces that foment within the revolution or after the revolution, not just the other army, right? Like you wouldn't like I don't people usually like the white army wasn't the counter-revolutionary force, it was just like the czars. Okay. Yeah.
Taiwan has been a larger part of like China historically, and the original Taiwanese claim was that the entire mainland China belonged to what is now known as Taiwan, and that was the American foreign policy.
So again, this is not true. Originally, it was the position of Taiwan, of the RNC, that they controlled all of mainland China, but that hasn't been the case for decades. Taiwan does not today pretend that mainland China is theirs, whereas China continues to pretend, ROC, I keep saying the other, yeah, ROC, sorry. Whereas China continues to pretend today that it controls Taiwan. So this is not like a 50-50 tit for tat thing. The government of Taiwan is not constantly threatening to invade mainland China. They're not saying that they own mainland China. They do not pretend internationally that they own mainland China, whereas China does all of those things to Taiwan.
Policy position as well, because you know China was communist and Taiwan was a fascist military dictatorship. So they were like, oh yeah, we're just gonna completely ignore China until Nixon normalized relations with China, and then Taiwan became a democratic country, of course, with still a lot of.
I don't think the United States recognizes Taiwan as independent. The United States recognizes the legal facade of Taiwan being a part of China because we, the United States, understand that it's a condition for trade and diplomacy with China. China will not like engage evenly with countries that acknowledge the reality that Taiwan is a separate country. However, we have a separate embassy in Taiwan. We treat Taiwan like a separate country. This is what I mean by like legal facade. And it's weird to me that like lefties would buy this. In every material sense, Taiwan operates as an independent country. And in every material sense, the United States treats Taiwan as an independent country. When it comes to like trade and exchanges of information, we don't go to mainland China to ask their officials about stuff about Taiwan. We go to Taiwan. Like we treat it like an independent country. But both America and China maintain this ruse that it's all one country because China insists on it, because China has its own reasons for wanting to invade Taiwan. This is why China got really upsetty spaghetti when we sent Pelosi over to Taiwan like a year and a half ago, if you recall.
Of reactionary opinions overall, but like that's gone away in recent years. I think the younger generations have a different perspective on the matter. But overall, like historically speaking, Taiwan and China being the same country, it has been around for much longer than, like, as Elon Musk said, Hawaii being an American state.
What does this mean? What does this mean? Taiwan operates as its own country. What does this mean?
Much, much longer.
Notice how this is really similar to the stuff that people will say, where they'll go like, oh, I'm not defending Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but you know Ukraine actually used to be Russian territory? Like, what does that have to do? What does any of this have to do with the material fact that it operates as a separate country?
Taiwan is already independent. That's what I'm saying. People don't want a formal declaration just because they don't want a fucking war. But they're not wanting to be Hong Kong and be consumed by the Chinese.
Yes, Elon Musk also recently made statements arguing that Taiwan is a part of China.
Party.
They don't want to be Hong Kong? What happened in Hong Kong?
Am I saying the right place?
No, you
They
are
were independent, and then they got fucking eaten.
They were
up.
not independent.
Oh, they had some rights. They were less independent.
Is he seriously going to defend the purge of Oh man.
To Taiwan, and then they got eaten up.
Hong Kong was bought by
Are you saying the people of Hong Kong did not want to be?
There were certainly people that did not want to be a part of China. Absolutely.
They settled on one China, two systems, and then there were massive protests because China immediately violated the agreements they had and started. Not only did they start violating agreements they had with treatment towards Hong Kong, they also started arresting people who were part of Hong Kong's separate political system. And protesters started disappearing, and that's what led to the Hong Kong protests. It wasn't just people in Hong Kong didn't want to be a part of China. It's that China immediately broke the agreements they had. And China broke those, by the way. China broke those protests They didn't come to like a conclusion. There was no democratic resolution to that. China just with its overwhelming might crushed Hong Kong, and now like Hong Kong is basically just a part of China with no like separate. There are some separate systems as I understand it, but they broke their agreements, you know? Why would Taiwan ever want to be controlled by China when they've shown what they were willing to do with Hong Kong? This is funny, a leading Hong Kong pollster to stop reporting results to sensitive topics will stop releasing its poll results on a series of sensitive questions to the public, including China's Tiananmen Square crackdown and Taiwan independence. Hold on one second. There we go. Wait, now this one's stupid caption. What the fuck? Why would I just Googled John Cena speaking Chinese? I don't know why. Okay, whatever. Never mind. Just move on.
That is 100% correct.
Most of them.
A lot of people
there took a lot of pride in not being.
A lot of people enjoyed having Western civil liberties while simultaneously
that sure is nice.
Like being in a unique position. But now that China already does regular trade with the rest of the world, because like at a time in like the 90s, Hong Kong was seen as like this prosperous middle ground, but since the 2000s, like because of an insane amount of development and insane trade relations with the rest of the planet, there are tier 1 cities that are even larger and have more economic activity than Hong Kong in and of itself. And there was always a timeline where Hong Kong was going to be given back to China. They just accelerated it by like 2 decades.
By breaking the agreements. What? You can tell he's nervous. He knows he's bullshit. He knows he's treading on really thin ice right here. Yeah, the way he's talking, 100%. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. Because that was a lease on Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. So the people of Hong Kong, there were certainly a lot of people in Hong Kong that did not want to be a part of the Chinese state. But overall, if you look at the situation in Hong Kong right now, it's like they claimed that it was going to be devastating, and that has not happened.
It's like he admitted that they lost their civil liberties, but he isn't admitting that he admitted it. I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't understand the shit that China did to Hong Kong. Like, notice how everyone stopped talking about it after it happened because it was so inevitable. China is a fascist state. They want full consolidation, no democracy. They want like Han Chinese control over their territory. The idea of allowing like civil liberties to flourish with civil liberties and all the journalism that it implies flourish in Hong Kong, like absolutely not. No.
Not that we know of, because they have no freedom of speech anymore.
Okay.
They can't talk. They lost their right.
That part is true. You're right.
What are we going to learn from them?
I will not.
They have secret prisons, bro.
I do not agree with China's social or civil liberties policies. I do not agree with that at all. That's why I don't live in China. I live in America. However,
a curious tendency for Westerners who sing the praises of China and Russia is that they live in a country where you're legally allowed to make contrary statements about the government that you're in. You know? It's just, I have to hear, all I'm saying is I have to hear a lot of like China, Russia, North Korea defending from Westerners, but I wouldn't have to if they lived over there.
Having said that, you can just go to Hong Kong and you can just go to every part of China pretty much.
Okay.
And see for yourself. This is no longer like the North Korea style hermit kingdom where like no information comes out. Like,
what is this? What I just don't understand what this reflexive desire to defend. Why? We were talking about invading Taiwan, and now it's like, okay, well, they broke the back of Hong Kong and violated all these agreements. And he's like, well, sure, maybe you have no freedom of speech and no civil liberties, and also they broke all these agreements and also threatening war. But did you know that you can travel to China as a Westerner? Yes, I'm aware of that. They practically beg Westerners to because it brings capital into their country and incentivizes investment.
We have
regardless,
we have a shit ton of Chinese people that live in America. And
regardless, bro, it's not that
China.
They had
been watching Hasan streams for a few years. Never once has he mentioned what Chinese police do to LGBT organizations or the mass arrests of Marxist student protesters. Not once ever. No, because again, he's so desperate to be like a broadly beloved like celebrity of the left that he doesn't want to alienate any of the tankies in his audience, which makes the problem worse. We wouldn't have this huge weird issue of like a ton of Western lefties who seem to genuinely believe that these are proletarian states if it wasn't for people tiptoeing all over it. This is like a different version of the exact same problem that happened with woke scolds and breadtube, where like breadtuber after breadtuber after breadtuber ended up like leaving or having horrible experiences because they never did anything to combat or deal with the shared community of insane hyper online woke scolds that ended up like making Lindsay Ellis leave the platform or getting ContraPoints back on opiate addiction or whatever. They could have at any point dealt with it, but rather than deal with it, they just desperately tried to cater to them and be in their good graces, not knowing that you're essentially feeding the piranhas that travel the river you'll have to walk across one day too. It's insane.
Rights. They don't have rights now. They lost a lot of rights. But whatever. I mean, you're. This is interesting that you're very soft. You're very soft-footed around the issue of China. You love China.
I think China.
If you love China so much, why don't you marry it?
Once again, I don't live there. I choose to live here.
Like what I have seen Hasan talk about issues off the cuff. Why is Hasan speaking as though like Xi Jinping is personally behind him with a gun to his head? Like, what is this? Like, I'm genuinely asking why. Like, I've seen Hasan talk more off the cuff about a bunch of issues. Like, why is he so careful? Is he being like paid or something? Does he think that he's going to break into like the Chinese market at some point? Well, I don't understand.
Because of the issues that you just brought up, which is civil liberties being taken away, no freedom of speech, walled garden internet. Like there are certainly parallels to the American state or the Western world that there are certainly comparisons that you could make, but
okay, so he finally he admits that there are civil liberties and free speech issues. So let's pivot back to the West. Okay, well the West also does that. Like, dude, if anybody talked like this about America, we would instantly call them out for what they are. Like this discomfort with an unwillingness to acknowledge any wrongdoing. And when you do acknowledge wrongdoing, it's like, okay, well, did you know that in Iran they also have police that do bad things? Like, why?
Overall, that kind of
a lot of pro-China campus gets super aggressive if you say Taiwan is independent in all but name, might be worried about backlash. First of all, that's cowardly. Second of all, that only makes the problem worse. You're only going to have to tiptoe around the subject of China more and more and more the more you make the online left space like a catered shit pit for that particular kind of like you're just needlessly letting them infiltrate our discourse and propagate misinformation and bad ideas and bad leftist praxis for no reason other than because it hurts to rip the Band-Aid off. I mean, I do fine. I'm not anywhere near as big as Hasan, but clearly my antagonism towards fascist states like China hasn't prevented me from speaking broadly about the subject. I have no idea how he could believe he couldn't, like... He would not lose much by speaking out against this.
Mechanism of control is one that I do not appreciate personally, which is why I choose to live here. But as far as like cruelty, oppression, like what you're talking about with respect to Hong Kong, the promises that Western media overall made about like how China was going to crush Hong Kong under its like ruthless, oppressive thumb.
Well, they literally did. They broke the agreements. They arrested members of the like elected council. They completely like destroyed their independent political governance. They broke the protests. Like they did that. That was true. That happened.
Has not happened.
I don't think that was the point. I think the point was just that there's whoever was, vocal about wanting to maintain certain rights in Hong Kong was probably thrown in a secret prison and never heard from again.
I mean, certainly there was political dissidents are definitely
not the
political
best.
dissidents are definitely like
taken out back.
They're not killed or anything, but
oh my god, dude. Well, they're not I mean, well, they're okay, sure, right. Well, okay. So many societies have had secret police.
And then it's like completely
they
unacceptable.
They take a walk and and they go for a beer and they don't come back.
They're not good on that stuff. 100%.
But well, anyway, I was just curious.
I just don't understand how you can be like super up in arms in ACAB when cops in America fail to de-escalate, but when secret police disappear political activists in China, it's like, oh yeah, that's bad. I don't get it. Are you actually anti-ACAB, or is it just because they're American pigs? I genuinely don't get it. Like, why? How on earth can you possibly have like such a yeah, they took the L on that one on this.
I didn't mean to open a can of worms, but you say you think the people of Taiwan whatever they want, and it seems to me that the people of Taiwan want independence. So I'm right with you there, brother. Independence for Taiwan.
I think one nation, two systems.
One nation, two systems.
Yeah. What? Which is the current,
like Israel and Palestine.
Oh my God! You don't.
Oh, how dare you bring up an apt comparison?
Want to go down that rabbit hole? Come on.
Why not, dude? Tankies will constantly defend like Israel-Palestine dynamics, just in any other instance. Yeah.
I'm just fucking with you. I'm just trying to get you.
Ethan has really found his flow. I feel like Hasan is so clearly uncomfortable.
That part is like literally. I mean, that is a. I mean, that's a advocacy in the opposite direction, in my opinion, where
independence for Taiwan. You heard it here from Hasan.
Because remember, like the overwhelming majority of people living in Taiwan are still Han Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
They're
blood and soil. What? And
therefore, despite the fact that it's a separate country,
it's
still like the same people.
Dude, why? What gun is held to his head? What, dude? They're the same people because their blood is this. What do you mean? Like, South and North Korean people are the same in like a genetic sense, I guess, but culturally, South and North Korean people are so different that South Koreans probably have significantly more in common with Americans than they do North Koreans, because South Korea is basically a Western state. Like, why? What? I'm sorry. Well, listen, okay, man. Taiwan, listen, it was Chinese soil 100 years ago, and it's Chinese blood today, so I guess it's part of China. That's how it works, you know?
Language is the same. People will.
This is what they use to justify Ukraine, right? This is what they use to justify the annexation of the Sudetenland. I have no idea what kind of like dark demonic impulse compels lefties to think like, how do I defend this bad country? I know, shared blood. Like, what? I don't get it. I do not get it. I just don't understand.
We'll say
Ukraine belongs to Russia for that exact reason.
Hey,
I don't think Ukraine belongs to Russia because Ukrainian nation state, the Ukrainian nation state project, there are similarities. You're not wrong about that. But the Ukrainian nation.
Oh yeah, here we go. Polling on Taiwanese identity, guys. You're not going to believe it, but the overwhelming majority of Taiwanese people consider themselves to be Taiwanese over Chinese. There's a portion of people who believe both, but that portion has decreased massively in recent years. Where now people who say both are down here, and people who say just Taiwanese are like 60 to 80%. If you can believe it. Yeah, here's the green is Taiwanese identity. This is both, of course, and then red's Chinese identity.
State project as a well-defined nation state has always has been around for much longer than like Taiwan being an independent nation state.
So the people's entitlement to freedom.
Like you can make a better argument for Crimea being a separate country than like.
But what I'm hearing is that it's just a function of how old their culture is, how entitled they are to freedom.
It's not. I don't think that it's like those two concepts are not the two concepts at play here. Like it's not like entitled to freedom versus what was the other thing that you said?
Well, it just seems like you're talking about like their.
Okay, I know I'm really pulling it on here, and I'm not trying to like overdo it. Like I'm speaking sincerely on this, okay? But in terms of like a leftist position on foreign policy, Ethan is much, much, much closer to that than Hasan is right now, like by a significant margin. And notice how Hasan's logic keeps changing over and over again, where it's like, oh, well, this thin veneer of a legal framework is why they're actually one country. Oh, well, it's because of the same blood. Oh, did you know China actually owned Taiwan like a while ago? It's because of that, actually. Where he doesn't seem to have any sort of convincing, consistent underlying logic. He's just shifting between whatever arguments he thinks work. A lot of them being basically blood and soil arguments. Whereas Ethan's position is completely consistent and seems to favor like independent local democracy, sovereignty, and like what the people actually want. Ethan is so much closer to like an actual left-leaning perspective on the issue.
They're they have some kind of national heritage or identity.
Well, the thing that I was mentioning there, the reason why I mentioned that is because you were talking about making a comparison between like Israel Palestine,
No,
being
I was
that
being more
being that
silly
like
about
yeah,
that.
being the same people. I think.
Can someone slap Ethan out of this? God, can people get some talking points that aren't directly from CNN? Ethan Klein, I am issuing you this warning, okay? If you don't get Hasan off this track, this is going to be, like, this is going to drag you in too. A bunch of, like, 14 to 19-year-olds with no social skills who legitimately think that leftism is when you support the proletarian state of the Chinese Communist Party controlled China or whatever, okay? You have been correct in everything you've said, and Hasan has been shiftless and disorganized and inconsistent, and people in chat are still arguing that you're the one who's just like repeating lib nonsense. You got to deal with this.
Makes that kind of, especially existing under the construct of having like one nation state regardless, with freedom of travel in between. It's literally like a mile off the coast, you know what I mean, of China. Having all of that factors into like whether there's going to be assimilation or not. And there's no need for assimilation even. They have like normal trade relations with Taiwan, you know what I mean? It's like, that's why it's considered to be a delicate political conversation, but one that currently the current system benefits both.
And so if
places.
China takes military action against Taiwan, as some people
Again, notice how like there's no consistent arguments here. First of all, the idea that like whatever, man, Taiwan is so close to China. Well, as somebody in chat just pointed out, America is 0 miles from Mexico. It's like, what do you mean? Like country being close to other country means you can't respect national sovereignty? What does that even mean? Taiwan is like 100 miles off the coast, I think, of China, something like that. Not far, but you know.
speculate may happen.
88 miles?
Yeah, I mean
88 miles. Maybe Ukraine wasn't the real Western adjacent breakaway state with poor relationship to its previous colonial owner that America has been.
that would not be good. I don't think that would be good. I think that would be really, really terrifying. It would be disruptive for the entire global economy as well.
Right, but I'm just mean like from whose army are you joining?
No,
Whose front line are you fighting?
I'm moving to
Taiwan.
I'm moving to an
This is
undisclosed
conversation.
location. I'm moving to an undisclosed location.
I think it also speaks to a lot of ideological weakness that you like. This kind of wiffle waffling and inability to take a strong position is something that I associate with liberal politicians, with people who are media trained out the ass and will just avoid giving any real like this again, it's with me, right? Like I'll give a direct answer on basically anything, even if I think it's a really complicated subject, like say how exactly to move forward with Israel Palestine. I'll still give really strong answers, you know, even if I think the subject is complicated. I want people to at least know where I am. But both China, like Hasan is literally like, well, you know, according to the United States, we recognize one country, two systems, and that's fine by me. Wait, like what is this cowardice? What is this like pearl clutching inability to express an actual opinion? It's so weak. It's weak.
I'm on the front.
I'm gonna be on a
line.
fucking ship.
Whoever has the
streaming.
best computer chips, I'm fighting for.
Okay.
I'm a chip boy
Well,
myself.
If it wasn't for America, China would have some pretty solid chip technology, but America's like regularly trying to stop that process. Like they went to the Netherlands to be like, you can't sell China your chip technology, which is fucking insane if you ask me.
It's incredible.
I can't believe that the United States would make an effort to try to block advancements from its main trading opponent. I wonder how honestly that's being represented. Hold on. United States, Netherlands sold China microchips. It's not like China like respects copyright law anyway. Oh, this was from just 4 days ago. Hold on. U.S. and Netherlands are set to hit China's chip makers with 1-2 punch. The Dutch government plans to announce new regulations. The planned U.S. rule will require licenses to export equipment to about a half dozen Chinese facilities, including a lab operated by SMIC. So they're trying to withhold Dutch equipment from Chinese tech labs. Seems we've been doing this for a while. Honestly, I don't think anyone can really be surprised by stuff like this, as long as China continues to not respect American or Western copyright law. Obviously, we're not going to be nice with them when it comes to international trade agreements. Like, it's not as though China cooperates with us on like broader trading blocks or respects our rules. So I don't know how people will expect us to like play even with them on those circumstances.
The takes in chat, how many people are like, just the polarization of this topic. It's insane.
Well, of course there's going to be polarization on the topic because the American media has been gearing people to be across the board like vicious no matter what.
Here we go. Hey, why do you have a shit take on this? Well, I have to compensate for American media. I hear this so many times, dude. This are so many times I hear this exact same thing. Hey, why is it that your perspective is super biased? Well, my bias is actually countering out the other bias. And I have to, it's very important that I promote glorious CCP line on subject because most Americans only listen to American media. That was BJG's thing on Crystal Powell. This is what every propagandist says.
To any foreign adversary, China being the main foreign adversary now. So people are going to be very passionate in their defense and start saying, we care about the people in Taiwan. You're not talking about the people in Taiwan. You don't care about them.
It's the media. If it weren't for the media's propaganda, people would not be siding with Taiwan.
Yeah. I mean, think about it this way.
This is literally just Chinese propaganda. If it wasn't for lying Western media, everyone would recognize glorious China's claim to sister isle of Chinese Taipei. Like, seriously. It's ridiculous. The average American doesn't know shit about Taiwan. The idea that the media is producing this bias, like, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Why the does no one care about Yemen? You know what I mean?
See, again, now appeal to hypocrisy. Because nobody in America knows about Yemen or Taiwan. You're manufacturing some kind of hyper-propagandized American public that's knowledgeable enough on these subjects to be able to point to Yemen on a map, which they can't, or Taiwan on a map, which they can't, and you're using that to justify like a super biased perspective. It's not valid.
Why? Because Saudi Arabia is the one, our ally, Saudi Arabia, is the one doing the genocide in Yemen. And you never see people get this passionate.
The same whataboutism every time, man. Just this broad ramble about Western bias that has absolutely nothing to do with the subject at hand. America bad, America bad, America bad, America bad.
Well, Yemen, I think people get this passionate about Syria.
I think Taiwan has more relevance to the United States, like in terms of economical, and social.
Yeah, that was developed.
Well, that's only natural that people would care more about something that affects them more.
I don't think Americans care broadly. Also, like, regardless, even if you acknowledge that people in America are misinformed on Yemen, which of course they are. Oh yeah, and Thana, I agree. I never hear lefties talk about Yemen unless it's to blame America for not talking more about Yemen. Seriously. I've seen enough like headlines or Hasan content or articles or whatever. I don't see lefties bringing up Yemen. Quit pretending, okay? You like all the time, like Ukraine happens and people are like, oh, Ukraine, why not talk about Yemen? You don't talk about Yemen. Because what are you going to talk about? It's been years and years and years of interminable suffering over which we have no control, and our politicians barely even acknowledge it because it's not even directly through us in a lot of cases. It's just something you point at in order to justify apathy on other topics people do care about. It's not a real... Yeah, and I've never seen anyone passionately argue that Yemen should be bombed, but I am seeing right now Hasan passionately defend like China's perspective on Taiwan. So like you can't argue, you can't gesture at this broader ignorance on a subject and then go like, well, now that we've established this ignorance on a topic that I don't talk about either, now let me explain why it's necessary for counteract this mystical Western propaganda by lying in favor of China.
I don't think Yemen.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just don't think Yemen affects.
But it's still people. There's still people that are being mercilessly slaughtered, whereas no one is being slaughtered.
See, now Hasan gets to disingenuously posture as some kind of like advocate for Yemenis people. That's like a hardline issue for him. And you bring other claims to him, like, man, what about Taiwan? He's like, no, I have to spend more time talking about Yemen, this topic that I talk about so often.
In Taiwan in a similar capacity, and yet there are way more passionate because.
Not saying it's right or wrong.
Said,
I mean,
it is designed to have this kind of.
And you think that if the only reason people care about Ukraine is because of the media?
Absolutely, 100%.
That's the only reason anyone cares about anything. It's a meaningless statement. People only care about anything because the media. Where do you think people get their news from? No shit. Yeah, the only reason you care about this thing is because you've been provided information about this thing. Wow. Extraordinary. Okay. I searched Yemen on Hasanabi, and judging from the fact that the very top result doesn't even have Yemen in the title, I think that means there's not a single video with Yemen in the title on his entire channel. But he's talking about Saudi Arabia with Miskif, so Yemen definitely comes up in this one. And then Turkey, China, Joe Biden, Ukraine, a 5-year-old video defending gun control with facts. I mean, I can understand why he has to spend so much time countering the Western narrative on Taiwan, because after a long, hard day of educating people on Yemen, he has to correct the record on other issues pertaining to distorted Western propaganda on foreign policy.
Nobody would care.
Yeah, of course.
Did anybody care about Georgia?
Yeah. That's a great question.
I don't know.
Western media didn't talk about Georgia that much.
No. No one gave a shit about Georgia. That's crazy.
Hold on. Well, I mean, what about in Europe? They seem to care about Ukraine a lot.
It's the similar principle. Media is still media everywhere.
Yeah, so it's a meaningless statement. Yeah, media informs. You could be living on like the eastern border of Poland and not know about the Ukraine war unless media tells you. Like if nobody tells you anything, then if nobody tells you anything, you don't know about things, obviously. But media prominence might like scale in proportion to the immediacy of the issue. The fact that Taiwan is a country with which we have a defensive pact and China keeps threatening to invade them is pretty significant. I don't know notice how he has succeeded in diverting this topic from the actual subject at hand, and now it's just this meaningless like how do we arbitrarily quantify the amount of media attention on any given issue when we were talking about the very immediate subject of Chinese treatment of Taiwan
around the world?
I mean,
it plays Ukraine a very significant role in people's lives.
Hold on. Ukraine borders Europe, and I mean, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but Georgia is not really.
I hope people who are watching this understand that like I really do bite my tongue quite a lot when it comes to criticizing Hasan, because there is like a 100% like interest on my end, like self-interest in not going hard against Hasan, because in spite of the general antagonism between us, it's not something that I've ever really been that loud about. And obviously there is a shared like audience between us, one which is much more in his favor because he's far larger than I am. So don't think that this is just like me being needlessly antagonistic. There were so many times that I've held off on this. I don't understand what motivates this behavior apart from this stupid, empty-headed, brainless desire to just be everyone's favorite boy on the left. And that means not going against the narrative of the loudest and most toxic people on the left, which are the tankies.
In such a geographically, strategically important location as Ukraine.
Okay.
Well, I'm just explaining why people might care more about Ukraine than Georgia. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying
still
why.
People. It's the people.
Thanks for your incredible wisdom. Still people. Thank you. That's oh man, is that true? They have people in the state of Georgia. Okay.
Saying it's not people.
Slaughtered.
I'm just saying because your theory is that the support for Ukraine and Taiwan is essentially manufactured, that it wouldn't exist. It shouldn't exist.
I'm not saying it shouldn't exist. I'm simply
Nobody
stating
said
that.
yeah.
I'm simply stating that
It's manufactured.
the
People only care
tremendous
about it
amount-
because they've been tricked to caring about it.
It's not tricked, but
Not
dude, like, normal people don't think about foreign policy. Are you saying that?
I don't understand what argument is even taking place here. I don't even understand. What, like, okay, media informs us on all of these issues. The question is, are we being informed to a point and to a position that is proportional to the actual, like, meaning of this issue, right? Like, sure, yes, media is what gets us here. So, follow-up question, should it have? I think that Taiwan and Ukraine are very important things to care about. I think that Yemen is as well. I also think it's going to be just innately less interesting to a Western audience because Ukraine is a ground war happening in Europe, and Taiwan is a strategic ally of the United States that we have a shared defensive pact in that China, one of the world's like superpowers, constantly threatens to invade, whereas Yemen is, let's be fair here, a bombed rubble heap that is continuing to be bombed and rubble heaped. And not even by us directly, by Saudi Arabia, a country that most Americans don't even like. And media on Saudi Arabia is mixed at best. It's not like you go to the press and you see all the op-eds on Saudi Arabia and it's just people singing their praises. Obviously, there's plenty of criticism of the House of Saud, you know, and the regime. So, like, I don't understand when now we've succeeded in distracting from the point. We're now arguing over this, like, ephemeral, unquantifiable, like, how much should people care? It literally doesn't matter, okay? Just say what you think is right.
You don't think that normal people's opinions about like international matters are shaped by what they see on the news and what's prioritized by that?
I'll give you.
He sounds nervous too. Why is his voice shaking? You're not. What's going on here, man? Dude, there's a bunch of CCP agents in the building pointing guns at them. Why is his voice quivering too? Why is Ethan the only one who's not? G is right behind that wall, man. Jesus Christ.
A better example.
Of course it is.
Hold on, because I'm being double teamed now, so I need to speak.
Okay.
Of course it is. But this implication that you're like, if you say nobody cares about Taiwan or Ukraine because of the media, it implies that, you know, the support for those two countries or care for those two countries is like,
Nobody
you know,
implied
manufactured. That it's really not sincere. That's what
I think the correct answer here is not whether or not it's manufactured, but whether or not it's warranted. Like, you can argue intentionality forever when you're talking about why people are informed, whatever. Does the Western media have like more of an interest in informing you on some stuff than others? Yeah, sure. But that's the case for literally all things. So why not just ignore that step in the process and ask, like, okay, now that we've established that it's like manufactured or like whatever, I don't care. You know, now that we've established that it exists, is it warranted? And I think Ethan's doing great, by the way. Yeah.
You jumped to that. Nobody
I'm
said.
sorry.
No,
but-
I am saying that. I
yeah,
think,
he is saying
Yeah,
that.
I'm saying that the support for the overwhelming majority of Americans,
Yeah,
for any
manufactured,
country
not
that
authentic.
any country that the United States of America has a genuine interest in, is manufactured in either direction. It can be manufactured carelessness and inconsideration, like being inconsiderate and ruthlessly violent at certain points, which is the example I was going to use with 9/11 and what we did post 9/11. Or it could be manufactured in the other direction, where it's like, this is the just war. This is the just war that we have to fight, like we did in Vietnam originally, when there was need to generate popular support for whatever kind of
Jibber jabber. This is jibber jabber 100%.
action America consistently takes. Now,
I'm not denying that propaganda exists.
Yeah. Think
But
about
I
it
am
this way.
saying that,
By the way, this whole thing has been on speed 1.2 times.
like, the comparison of Ukraine to Georgia is not apples to oranges. That's all I'm saying. It's not.
What what do you mean by this? That it's
Ukraine borders like mainland Russia or Europe.
not? Okay.
Europe cares a lot about it.
Okay. I would say that it's probably more. I would say that in Europe, there's probably more of a not controversy necessarily, but it's a more divisive issue in I think Europe than it is in America, most likely.
It's also like, you know, not
Because-
the best.
That's not true if you're right next to Ukraine. The Baltic states, Poland, like no states that are right next to Ukraine, the ones that are literally like rockets miss and go over the border and strike their territory, are not like, I don't know, I can really give or take on this. Finland joined NATO over this.
Precedent when like tyrants start land grabbing in Europe generally
I don't disagree with that. I agree with you. I think
yeah, Poland is fucking militarizing. Poland literally just bought like 500 HIMAR rocket systems from the United States. Like the behavior of Russia has not only like unified Europe in opposition to this in support, but it's also led to them starting to militarize.
I think that
and so I understand why people don't like
completely unjustifiable. And it's also, even if you're like pro-Russia, pro-Vladimir Putin, anti-NATO, right? Even if you're all of those things, it is a laughably idiotic thing to do, because all you've done is now galvanize NATO support in Europe and justified it. Because that was the entire reason for NATO's existence, is to stop the USSR, stop communism from thriving. And obviously, Russia is a very different country than the USSR was, and is no longer.
Honestly, nah, not really. It was a corrupt, authoritarian dictatorship then, and it is now. Like I don't think it didn't really change that much. It was state capitalist then. It's capitalist.
Longer ideologically aligned with communism at all. It is
never was.
It is a state that Western capitalists basically redesigned, and propped up oligarchs, including people like Vladimir Putin.
That is true. We did do that.
So, despite all of that, it's still utilized as a protection racket that you basically.
It's not a racket. Countries can choose whether or not to be a part of it, and a lot of countries in NATO don't even contribute the expected share of their own military budget. Like, it's so not a racket that not only can you choose to enter it or to leave it, but a lot of countries are just not making their payments, and America is like compensating for it.
Basically justified its existence of by doing such an unimaginably cruel, inhumane, unjustifiable act, invading Ukraine. So it's a strategic blunder, even if you're like pro-Russia.
I do think that I just think people are capable of caring about it without.
Well, I mean, I care
being
about
like,
it.
You know,
I care about it.
People sincerely care about it, even though, you know, you think it's unfair that people didn't care as much about Georgia. You know, that's my point.
It's not necessarily just not caring about Georgia. My opinion on this is that we, as a nation here in America and all around the world, are not immune to propaganda.
Oh my God. It's like 101 shit every time, man. God damn. It's like you become a lefty and you learn, whoa, dude, the media lies to you sometimes, and then that's the only thing you ever learn. Like it's what does that even mean? No, it doesn't. None of this means anything. It's not like if we were talking about like propaganda lying to you, then say what the lie is, you know? Like lefties or fake lefties or whatever will say, bro, you're just repeating CNN talking points when you say things that are objectively correct about China. Like Ethan did that. Ethan is like, okay, yeah, but China really did bowl over Hong Kong and disappear their activists and crush them with police force. And then it's like, oh, well, yeah, because the Western media focuses on that. It's like, okay, well, it's true. That did happen. The Western media was correct because it was real. So I feel like the issue here, it's not just whether or not Western media is lying. It's like, hey, Western media, don't shine a spotlight on bad things that my pet dictatorship does. Like, Western media must not only be true all the time, and that would be great, don't get me wrong, but it must also lie to cover China and never cover the bad things that China does. Because if it does, and you listen to them, that means you're repeating CNN talking points when you engage in such horribly unlefty behavior, like, I don't know, condemning China, shutting down LGBTQ and Marxist clubs. You know, if you believe the Western lies, and attack China on that behavior, that proletarian behavior, you know, you're actually being victimized by Western propaganda.
No.
As a matter of fact, every piece of information that we analyze has a great impact on our decision-making process, and therefore, doing a full media blitz on any particular issue is usually going to yield these kinds of results and this kind of support, which without that kind of media blitz would not exist. Does that make sense?
Again, I'm not denying that propaganda exists and that we're all, influence.
And
See, I feel like the only purpose of what Hasan's doing here is to disingenuously present this disagreement as though Ethan is unaware of or unwilling to acknowledge the concept of media bias, which is not something he ever said.
The example I was going to use was our justification for the invasion of Afghanistan. Oh my God. And the invasion of Iraq. These were both unjustifiable wars, in my opinion. The war on terror was across the board, wholesale, ruthless, cruel, led to millions of people dying, led to tens of millions of people being destabilized, and we're
Is this true? I'm just hearing about this.
Still living in the rubble of that kind of
Right,
cruel and unusual action. And it was championed by a majority of the American population, and until like the past couple of years, where
what does that have to do with Ukraine being invaded by Russia?
Good question.
Where do you think that kind of attitude came from?
Did you know that the media that lied about Iraq is the same media that told you that Russia invaded Ukraine? Curious. What the f does that mean?
Okay,
where do you think that justification came from? There was $1 billion industry.
Same thing, man.
What? Is he saying that Western media was incentivized to lie about Ukraine, or is he saying that Russia was incentivized to invade because of the military-industrial complex? What is he saying?
Ukraine was invaded by Russia.
No, it is exactly the same
and
thing.
It's literally a tyrant grabbing land in Europe.
I agree with what you're saying. My point is,
You're saying propaganda exists. Yeah, I know.
No, my point is that Americans think that they are independent thinkers.
Oh my God, dude. He doesn't have a point. My point is, after all of this rambling and jibber jabber about Iraq and Afghanistan, it's like, well, what's your point? He's like, well, my point is, all Americans think they're immune to propaganda, but they're not. Big lefty smile.
And yet they are motivated into believing things no matter what it is. It can be a just cause.
I agree that
it can be a just cause in the situation where you're
Did you know that people learn things because they're given information, and sometimes the information you're given can be true and sometimes it's not, and sometimes the things that you do because of it can be morally right and sometimes they can be morally wrong?
Supporting Ukraine and Ukrainian independence, which is an independent nation state. You know what I mean? It's been an independent nation state in the aftermath of the dissolution of the USSR. It's been an independent nation state. You can't just turn around and be like, all right, it's mine now, right? I agree with that.
Okay.
And that it can be seen as a just war, an understandable war. It's not even a war that the Ukrainian people wanted, right? But having said that, the American support, the full-throated support, is absolutely
It doesn't seem like there's full-throated support. There's a lot of people that don't support it. There's a very diverse opinion of
if you look.
Notice how his argument there, if he wasn't cut off, was Russia's invasion of Ukraine was morally wrong, but also Americans thinking it was morally wrong is somehow bad. What the f was he about to say? Literally, well, actually, yeah, the invasion of Ukraine was bad, but Americans only think it was bad because they were told to by the media, and, that's bad. What does any of this mean? I should be the biggest lefty streamer. I should be bigger than every other lefty streamer put together. And I will repeat the tautologies. I will say, did you know that sometimes the media lies and sometimes it tells you things? But alas, I am not taller than Hasan. Have you considered America as bad, though? No, I hadn't thought of that. I'll be sure to repeat that every single time I say anything.
That if you looked at polls in the original invasion, the amount of support
seems there's a lot of conservative people who are Putin simps, and then there's also a bunch of lefties, and I don't mean that derogatory.
Those aren't real lefties.
Who aren't who are like the guy we were speaking to, the communist professor.
Wolf?
Yeah, who's kind of he people like him are also very anti-Ukraine in general.
I don't know his entire perspective.
He doesn't seem very bullish.
I don't think you can be pro if you are offering even critical support to Russia, or not Russia, but like Vladimir Putin in general, I don't think you're doing the right thing.
I don't
think
know
that
what's
you've
his
got,
position because
Okay, I agree with that. But you would be offering a kind of critical support if you were saying stuff like, well, this is stuff Hasan said directly, but making arguments about Ukraine being historically Russian soil that like basically belongs to Russia. But you did that with Taiwan.
he didn't really flesh it out.
I think you're lost in the sauce. I think you're lost in the sauce in the sense that
me or him.
No, like anyone that is like, oh no, Vladimir Putin did the right thing. He has to have this.
I don't
like,
think people are
righteous
saying
conquest.
that. I think what I hear is like Ukraine, Zelensky is also, you know, a shit starter, and it's their problem that we shouldn't get involved in.
I don't know. I think there's a lot. There are people who like claim to be socialist or even communist that are like, you know, defending Vladimir Putin, but they're marginal.
What, Dan? You seem to think that the Ukraine.
Unfortunately, I wish they were marginal.
The Ukraine war isn't something America should get involved in.
When did I ever say that? What are you talking
just based
about?
on what you were saying about Georgia.
No, we were having a discussion about how media shapes narratives in the United States, and I was saying that again, I'm not talking about in Europe, I'm not talking about in the rest of the world. In the United States, the Russian invasion of Georgia was a non-story. Nobody gave a shit here.
But it's different. It is different. There's difference.
It was a sovereign nation that Russia invaded.
Because it doesn't. About? It's not. It doesn't have the same proximity.
Ethan, I know people are going to give you shit for this, but you're being a king, okay? The casual defense of fascism from leftist circles is not something that should be tolerated as just like par for the course. You've done nothing but ask legitimate questions, and failing to provide meaningful counters, you have been given a 20-minute lecture on how the concept of propaganda exists. But you are right, King.
Or the same importance within as Ukraine, I think.
Right, but we're talking past each other. Like that.
I'm not.
Yeah, Ukraine is more important to the United States strategically. That's why it gets attention. We're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. But okay.
We're
I know people are influenced by the media.
Right, but
it's like he's being gaslit. Like he never said otherwise.
You're saying you think that people, you know,
are allowed to care about things genuinely.
Nobody's saying
that you're not allowed to. I mean,
not allowed to. But Hasan was saying.
What was I saying?
That they're gaslighting him for sure. They were constantly like, oh, well, Western propaganda, Western media, they lie to you. Here, let me talk about Afghanistan. Let me talk about Iraq. Let me talk about how you're not immune to propaganda. And it's like, and then Ethan's like, what fucking point are you making? And it seems like they're both admitting like, oh, we weren't making any point at all. Like, they're basically just saying, oh, yeah, we didn't have anything. We weren't saying you can't have those opinions. We weren't saying that you believe that they're not susceptible to propaganda. Like, we're just saying stuff, you know?
That it's a manufactured support.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, and Dan,
that is something that the U.S. media does. They manufacture support for U.S. foreign policy.
You were saying I jumped to conclusion.
I'm not saying that all U.S. foreign policy is bad, but I think it is unquestionably true that the U.S. media crafts people's.
Of course.
Yeah, it crafts the narrative.
I'm going to try to reach out to you. I feel like Ethan gets a lot of like negative reception from Hasan's fans over. I'm going to try to reach out to Ethan and say like, hey, keep it up, King. Send him like a favorable email or something. That's enough of this. There's nothing argument now. They're just doing a nothing. Fucking.